What you're being paid for your time?
$250 an hour.
That's also coming from the attorney fund?
Yes.
Are you familiar with an event called Michael Lindell's Moment of Truth?
Yes. I spoke at the event.
You appeared and spoke at the event?
Yes, I did.
And where was that event held?
In Missouri.
In Missouri. And was your travel from Alabama to Missouri paid for by someone other than yourself?
Yes, sir.
And who paid for that?
That would, I would assume, would be Mike Lindell. All their travel was arranged. He asked me to speak at the event, and I spoke.
And that'd be true for your time? Did you also get paid for your time there?
I did not charge for my time.
And your lodging?
That's considered travel that was provided to me.
And when you say Mr. Lindell, you're referring to the My Pillow guy?
Yes, sir.
And you are a cybersecurity professional?
Yes, sir, I am.
During your investigation of this election, did you detect any hacking involved in the 22 general election in Maricopa County?
No, sir.
I believe you testified that yesterday you were down at McTech performing the court-ordered inspection of the ballots. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you were asked to select batches of ballots?
Yes.
You were asked to identify them. Did you use a highlighter and highlight the boxes?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe the custodian of those ballots opening those boxes?
Yes. They opened them in front of all the inspectors. There was a court reporter inspected. There was the other inspector for the other side, that gentleman sitting over there who said he was an attorney. We all were there as they went through.
Did the individual who opened the box break the seal?
By seal, are you referring to the red tape, which is simply red tape and not a security seal?
Well, I'm asking you what you observed.
I would not categorize what closed the boxes as a seal.
Did you see the serial numbers on it?
There were no serial numbers.
So in your professional opinion, the ballots were not sealed?
The ballots did not have an appropriate security seal on the boxes.
That's not on. So, okay, fine. My question was, were the ballots sealed?
They were closed with tape.
And where were they stored?
In the vault and in the tabulation center.
Now, would you say that your profession details are important?
Yes, they're highly important.
And you said that you reviewed the statutes prior to initiating this investigation?
I always have to do that because it's relevant, especially if a state states a statute.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And you also reviewed federal statutes?
Yes.
AVA, I think you said?
I'll go as far as back as the 1990 FEC standards. I've reviewed them all, every version of the BBSG.
And you downloaded Title 16?
Yes. I like to have references for when they're referred to because they've been referred to in the Secretary of State's manual, they were referred to in the Maricopa manuals and procedures. So I like to actually read what's referred to ensure that it's accurate.
And when you read those documents, you pay close attention to detail because that's required by your profession. Is that correct?
I'm not a legal attorney, and so I read the laws for what they state and how they are.
And you testified that you reviewed some documents that were provided to the Lake campaign by a FOIA request. Is that accurate?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe you ever testified to that.
Well, it's cross-exam, so it can answer the question if he understands it. If you don't understand the question, it's free.
No, these were public record requests that came from me from other technical professionals.
So they were not FOIA requests?
They were, Those records were obtained via FOIA request.
Are you familiar with FOIA? Can you tell me what FOIA stands for?
It's a Freedom of Information Act.
And is that statute a federal statute or a state statute?
That depends on what you're requesting the FOIA for. That's categorized at the federal level and state levels, to my knowledge.
So a FOIA can be either a state or a federal, in your understanding.
Yes.
And if federal was FOIA and state was a public records request under the Arizona statute, that would be a detail that doesn't interest you?
That, if the data was illegally obtained,
That's not the question. The question is the detail, difference between a federal statute and a state statute of interest to you?
when I provided evidence, I always asked the source of it. And I have received, in my experience, I have received evidence from law enforcement officials that, in my opinion, were not properly obtained. And as a forensic investigator who understands chain of custody and all the legal ramifications, because for the court's record, the majority of that deals with the statutes. For example, the lockpicks that I own as part of my security thing, in my state, I have to have a private investigator license. These are the statutes that a forensic investigator handling evidence has to be aware of.
Thank you. When you're working with your security thing, as you said it, are you familiar with federal statutes and state statutes?
Objection, Your Honor. Not sure that's the question.
Well, if he's
What kind of
confused,
federal-
I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next question.
You've just testified that you receive information from law enforcement that's both federal and state law enforcement. Is that correct?
I didn't say that. I said it was law enforcement, and
And you testified both federal law enforcement and state law enforcement. Is that correct?
what I just told you is I said I received it from law enforcement.
Well, when you receive information in your profession from law enforcement, are you familiar whether the law enforcement's federal or state?
Yes, when they provide me the evidence,
Is that a
yes.
detail that's important to you?
Yes.
I believe you testified that you examined some ballots that had been duplicated. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you testified that you examined the originals but not the duplicates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you examined and you testified that the duplicates were not kept next to the duplicate. The duplicates were not kept next to the originals. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're supposed to be traceable, and you should easily identifiable. Mr. Garrett said that he would have to get his techs busy, and that it would take them over a week to try to find them.
That's your recollection of what Mr. Jarrett said?
That is what Mr. Jarrett said.
And if the ballots, the originals those and the duplicates were in the boxes right next to each other, would that surprise you?
The duplicates that I was shown, because they were duplicated, were part of one of the vote centers and he opened both those boxes. And two, because they couldn't identify some of the original duplicates, they had to run and count them so they could try to map them back to which side they belong to.
So that's your recollection of what Mr. Jarrett said when you asked to see the originals of the duplicates?
No, sir.
I'm
They
asking you
were-
a detail. That's a detail that's important. You're telling this court that when you asked Mr. Jarrett to view the duplicates of the originals, that he told you it would take 6 hours.
To clarify, I did not ask to see duplicates. They were part of the vote center, and they provided the entirety of what they have for the vote center. They could not provide what was originally.
Thank you, Mr. Courier. I think the important point, and I want to ask you this to make sure that I understand it correctly, is that you did not ask to see the duplicates.
Objection, misstates his prior testimony argumentative.
This is cross, just for reference, and all cross. If he doesn't understand the question, he can have it rephrased, but particularly with an expert witness, he's capable of answering. If you don't understand, you can have it rephrased. If you do understand, you can go ahead and answer. Would you like the question restated to you?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Mr. Perrick, is it your recollection that when you asked Mr. Jarrett to see the duplicates and the originals, that he told you it would take 6 hours to get them?
One, I did not ask to see them. They
Well,
were
that answers my
provided.
question then. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. That answers my question. You did not ask to see them.
Your Honor, if I may,
But there's just, your counsel have to redirect,
yes,
so, just to answer his questions.
yes, sir. I just want to state the rule.
Well, wait,
Understood.
I have another question, Your Honor. It's appropriate.
please.
You've testified that you have a working theory that some of the ballots for the 2022 general election were on 20-inch paper, but were printed at 19 inches. Is that correct?
19-inch image printed on 20-inch paper. It is not a theory.
Okay, so it was 20-inch paper. The ballot was 20 inches, correct?
The paper was 20 inches.
And the image was 19 inches, according to your testimony, correct?
The ballot image was 19 inches, yes.
Are you familiar with a shrink-to-fit setting on a printer?
Yes, yes, I am.
Could a shrink-to-fit setting account for some of the ballots you observed being 19 inches on 20-inch paper?
That is a possibility, but it would violate the configuration settings they had for the voting systems and the tabulators.
And you've testified that you're familiar with the election process?
Yes, sir.
And you testified that if one were to take a 20-inch ballot that's shrunk to 19 inches and put it into a vote center precinct tabulator, it would not get tabulated.
It would not get tabulated at any tabulator.
Any tabulator. So,
That includes ICP or the ICCs at Central.
okay, so if it went down to Central, according to your understanding, and it was tried to run through the tower tabulators, it would also not be tabulated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you just testified that you observed some duplicated ballots. Is it your understanding that a ballot that cannot be tabulated by a precinct-based tabulator and cannot be tabulated by a tower configured tabulator at Central would then be duplicated?
It would have to be because it couldn't be tabulated, so it would require duplication.
And after duplication, what would happen to that ballot?
The duplicated ballot, which is supposed to be marked with a specific ID, and that ID must be recorded on the original, and I saw those stickers on the originals.
Question is, what would happen to that ballot?
Then the ballot would be rerun through the duplicated ballot would be run through the tabulator.
So it would be tabulated. Is that your testimony?
The duplicated ballot would be tabulated. Yes, it should be.
Okay, so if a voter walked into a vote center on election day, filled out a ballot, maybe had a shrink-to-fit setting on it, so it wouldn't be counted on the tabletop, would go into door number 3, goes on down to McTech, they put it into the tower tabulator, and it doesn't get counted, and then it gets duplicated, and then it gets counted, so that voter's ballot was voted and tabulated. Is that your understanding?
But you started.
Is that your understanding?
Your Honor, I can't answer that question the way he asked the question because it's inaccurate.
So that means it's not your, I'm sorry.
I don't understand. You can say, I don't understand, and you can rephrase it so you can understand. But if you don't like the way it's phrased, that's something that your counsel will have to clear up.
Yes, sir. Your Honor, if I need to address the court, I'm provided for technical expertise and give those options. And if the technical scenario is inaccurate, I cannot answer the question.
Let me try again. Ms. Lake, right here in this room, bona fide candidate for governor of Grand Canyon State. Hundreds of thousands of voters would love to have had her as the next governor. One of them chooses not to vote in the 26 days of early voting, or mail-in voting, or emergency vote center voting, but chooses to show up on election day, gets a ballot from a ballot-on-demand printer, and somebody, either intentionally or inadvertently, has hit the shrink-to-fit setting and this 20-inch ballot paper comes out 19 inches. This voter fills it out, Kari Lake, want her to be the next governor, throws it into the precinct tabulator. It comes out, goes into door number 3, goes down to McTech. The much more sensitive tabulators, according to you, it would not count it. It would then go to duplication. It would be duplicated. Then it would be tabulated. Is that your understanding of the elections in Maricopa County?
Your technical description is not possible.
So I apologize. I wasn't attempting to give a technical description. I was just saying what happens based on your testimony. So you're saying in that scenario, that voter who wanted to vote for Kari Lake would never have that vote tabulated. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is that a shrink-to-fit setting would rely at the application level, which would reside on the EMS, which Mr. Garrett just testified sends the print job to the printer. Therefore, it can't be accidental, as all the employees that man the EMS are trained.
Whether it's accidental or inadvertent.
I gave the two options, sir.
Please allow me to ask the question. I'll allow you to answer. Whether it's accidental or inadvertent, if the shrink-to-fit 19-inch ballot has to be duplicated, once it's duplicated, would it be tabulated? To your understanding.
There are two technical ways that that image would be there. None of the ways you it's
Sorry, Your
it's
Honor,
not
I'm
even
not-
possible.
That's
It's
not
not
possible.
possible, Your Honor.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Brady. That's not responsive to his question. If you are able to answer his question, you can do that.
Sir, are you able to answer the question?
I'm unable to answer your question.
Okay. Let me ask a different question. Are duplicated ballots tabulated? Maricopa County, general election 2022.
If they're duplicated correctly and they're configured correctly, yes, they should be.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. We're at the point where we need a break. We're going to take a 1 hour, not 1.5 hour recess. So we'll be back here at 1 o'clock to resume. So